Good morning, Comrade. You're listening to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is your weekly Good Morning, Comrade. Happy 2025. This episode is going to be going live on the 11th of January 2025. And let me tell you something. A lot of stuff has happened in 2025 so far. Here to talk about all of, is it 2026 yet? Here to talk about it is Jack Reno Sweeney. What's up, Jack?
How's it going, Jeff? Always good to be on the show.
Yeah, man. How you been? Happy, has anything happened over there? I've been dealing with a water outage in Richmond since Monday because snow knocked out one of the pumps, and there was just like no running water. We're still on a boil order here. I feel like I'm in the warm embrace of home, but just home away from home, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's been an eventful 9 days in New Orleans. It started literally at 3 a.m. New Year's Day, and it hasn't really let up. And between city council shenanigans and a clown car of Louisiana politicians in front of the national stage, showing us exactly what we deal with on a daily basis here.
Oh, and you got a wonderful visit from Joe Brandon as well, didn't you?
We did get a visit from Joe Brandon. I guess I'm honored he chose to spend his last 2 weeks or so in office with us. Very nice of him.
And just like ruin traffic like he always does.
Oh yeah. I don't even think people were texting me like, why is traffic so bad? And it turns out like no one even knew he was coming. But
yeah, so we're obviously alluding to the attack that took place in the French Quarter. So essentially somebody drove about 8 blocks or so and killed, what was it, about a dozen people that were just out there having fun, on Bourbon Street. That's just been sort of like the way to ring in 2025, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously a tragedy, and as the officials pointed out, in spite of it being the tourist center of town, a great proportion of the people killed, of the 14 people killed, were locals. Many of them, young people. So it really is a tragedy. But the way our public officials chose to respond to it was by making sure the whole world knew, don't worry, you can still come here.
It's still safe to come here.
Yeah, you can still come here for the Super Bowl. And don't get me wrong, like I like that people want to visit New Orleans. I like being a city that people want to visit. I think a lot of people from New Orleans do like showing people hospitality.
It's our whole thing. It's our thing.
It's our thing. But when our public officials, I'm going to quote a tweet I made myself, but when our public officials see themselves more as like managers of a theme park than as representatives of constituents who live here and work here, you have a serious problem. And this is absolutely, the public response has absolutely been in the frame of protecting tourism, not tourists, but tourism.
The industry takes priority over any human being.
Exactly. And, we're getting flashbacks to, post 9/11 Islamophobia. And, we're already getting hints of expansion of the security state, which is already really expansive in New Orleans.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Exactly. Yeah. No city anywhere else in the world is as emblematic of that phrase as New Orleans. I think we have had many, many good crises, and none of them have gone to waste.
Ever. Oh, that's one of the things that we're best at is really taking these opportunities, these catastrophes to, when it comes to Hurricane Katrina, completely reforming, among other things, the public school system into an all charter system. And now, I mean, obviously after this attack, there's going to be in the French Quarter definitely some changes that take place in how things run. It is like essentially turning. I mean, there's been talking about this for a very long time, but like turning the quarter into essentially like a pedestrian mall sort of thing. When people live there, people work there. I imagine that they're not. I mean, maybe they would want that, maybe they wouldn't, but they're definitely not being asked whether or not that's the thing that's going to be their priority. That the sort of the deal is how do we make it look to the entire world that we're out here protecting tourists. I mean, one of the things, and I have a lot of critiques of the mayor, and I have a lot of critiques of the chiefs of police and all these other people. But like when you have reporters coming at them saying like, how are you going to prevent something like this? You're essentially asking, how are you going to have a complete police state so that you can never ever, that you can essentially predict the actions of every single person? Like, how do you do that? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you maintain your glass bottle any better?
Yeah, I'm kind of two minds about it because there absolutely is, we call it security theater, right? Just not actually making people more safe, but projecting the image that you are.
That's why you got to take. That's why you got to take your shoes off at the airport.
Exactly. The whole TSA ritual, like especially these days, like they tell you to do different things on your way there than on your way back, and it all seems kind of made up on the spot lately. But I will say that the scale of this tragedy, in some ways, was certainly preventable, and a lot of it comes down to the same problems. Like the bollards that would have been blocking Bourbon Street were broken because they weren't maintained, because we don't hire people to maintain public works. We actually have fewer public works employees than Gretna. I can't tell you the exact numbers, but by a significant degree. Actually, there was a NOLA.com report about it where the reporter called the mayor of Gretna and said, New Orleans has this many public works employees. What do you think about that? And he said, that is insane. So that there's the classic neglect of public infrastructure element to it. There's the element of the police being over-resourced and under-competent. Like they had the movable barriers, the Archer barriers that were that they left in storage because they didn't want to deal with having to move them around. $250,000 they spent on those, and if even with malfunctioning bollards, those could have stopped a vehicle. Just sitting outside collecting rust. Like I used to bike past them all the time. I had no idea what they were, but yeah, they just sat there getting rusty. And then there was another series of barriers, wedge barriers, that kind of go in and out of the ground that were in the down position at the time. And people do, I think, rightfully point out, if someone wants to kill a lot of people, they'll find a way to do it. But just there were so many ways that the scale of this tragedy, like I said, could have been reduced, or at least reduced in some way that just didn't happen. And all of the proposed solutions involve having more cops present, which that you can have 1 million cops, they're not going to stop a car coming through if you refuse to maintain infrastructure. More emphasis on driving resources from other parts of the city to places like the French Quarter, which, like you said, people do live there, but the majority of people in the quarter at any given time are tourists. And again, tourists are entitled to safety as well, but none of what we've seen proposed is going to enhance anyone's safety. They're just using this tragedy to justify doing what they would have done and wanted to do anyway.
More surveillance, like I said, more money towards police, more reactive measures as opposed to preventative measures.
Exactly.
Proactive preventative measures is what I mean.
Precisely. And just the level of incompetence up and down. Like, I'm kind of grateful for that ridiculous press conference because you had the Republican governor, Jeff Landry, the Republican Senator, John Kennedy, our Democratic Mayor, LaToya Cantrell, and the Chief of Police, all saying essentially the same things and making it crystal clear how this is, the deterioration of our infrastructure, of public works, of things that make the city livable, and the emphasis on expanding the security state is a bipartisan measure.
I love bipartisanship. It's just so great. It always leads to good things.
Yeah, I mean, when CNN showed the press conference after it ended, that even the anchor said, "Wow, well, if I was a resident of New Orleans, I would not feel good about that press conference." So it was, it's embarrassing.
Our lapdog media looked up from us for a second and is like, "What?"
Just yeah, well, the local. And they got so mad at the questions that they were being asked because this was the first time in a while they've been in the national spotlight and really been grilled because our local media, doesn't want to ruffle feathers at all, whether it's Jeff Landry or
they do not. They are very, very subservient to power. The press in Louisiana, be it whatever locality, Jefferson Parish, Orleans Parish, St. Tammany Parish, they are not going to be asked. I mean, they like to talk about, Lee Zurich's really coming for him or whatever, and whatever. That's not really. I mean, that's sort of like a image and branding when you look at the brass tacks of it all. I mean, there's not that many challenges to actual power. It's like management of that power. If you look at these, at these Lee Zurich reports or whatever.
Yeah, they want to keep getting the guys that run the newspaper and are on the editorial board. Not only do they want to maintain their access to them as sources, but they want to keep getting invited to the same parties. The Mardi Gras balls, DC Mardi Gras coming up, and they don't want to have their invitation.
I want to miss that.
Yeah.
But and again, it's sort of like and you mentioned DSA. You're one of the co-chairs of that the New Orleans chapter there. There was a statement that you guys put out. You wanna talk about it?
Yeah, let me pull it up for reference. But I'm really proud of this statement, and I can say that because I'm not tooting my own horn. I was not the prime writer. I did help edit it down. Us on the left, we love
fantastic editing. That was what I thought. Fantastic editing of this thing.
We love writing really long statements, and I sometimes have to be the brevity police.
Yeah.
But we put it in the context of like I was talking about earlier, repeated failures to maintain services, maintain public works. We talked about the framing in the media of this, where it's put up as justification for more police when police already get 66% of the budget, and this is what we have to show for it. They don't keep people safe, they make people unsafe. We talked about, as I mentioned earlier, the Bollards fiasco, and we really went in on how more broadly the military industrial complex and imperialism relates to this, how the empire always comes home, because there were 2 attacks within 24 hours committed by former service members, and this is a problem that the Pentagon is aware of.
Both of them stationed at the same fort. Both of them stationed at Fort Liberty.
Yes. And this is a problem the Pentagon's aware of. They even commissioned a study to look into how do we prevent extremism in our ranks, and after that study was completed, decided not to implement that. Meanwhile, comparing the last, I think, 20 years to the previous 20 years, mass casualty events committed by former service members have quadrupled. So this is very much imperial violence being turning domestically in many ways, and it's a problem that the powers that be are aware of and chose not to do anything about. And then we also in that statement talk a bit about the resurgence of Islamophobia and the way this was very opportunistically used immediately by people like Donald Trump to say, before we knew the identity of the guy, to say that this is because we don't have closed borders. Meanwhile, like I said, this guy was a service member. He was from Texas. And you even see it being used by cynical actors to claim that Muslims do this wherever they are. So this is why we have to support Israel in their
Ben
fight against them.
Shapiro just like decided to just like come on down and just say all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean, I I guess part of me doesn't exactly want to say his name, but that former Columbia professor, who's made a real mockery of himself over the last year. Even he weighed in. Shy David, we'll call him. The ways it's been cynically used to advance the narratives and policy objectives that people wanted to advance and would have tried to advance anyway. It's harrowing. And I should mention, one of the people killed was a Palestinian New Orleanian teenager, his first year of college, and there was a lot of talk in the media early about two Israeli tourists who were injured, and even the Israeli consulate in Houston even sent a representative down here. And meanwhile, the person who lost, one of the people who lost his life is someone who may have family members who experience imperial violence at the hands of Israel and the United States as its primary financial and political backer. So it's really difficult to like be in a city that is going through a profound tragedy and to see it be used just as fodder for everyone else's preconceived political goals and objectives.
It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Really quickly, we'll get on that in a second. You listen to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. Jack Reno Sweeney is here. But like what you were just saying, like watching the sort of like your catastrophe that's taking place go through the like, the discourse machine, essentially, where they talk about did they even bring up DEI as a possibility for like why? I think did they bring up DEI as a reason for like the attack being successful or something like that? I'm sure somebody somewhere talked about it. I mean, you see Elon Musk posting on Twitter about the fires in Los Angeles being, DEI is responsible for that. It's just like that these people have a very sort of like focused like mind on these sorts of things, and it's always on whatever their hobby horse is. Like you mentioned earlier, you said Donald Trump immediately comes out and is like, immigrants did this, and obviously that wasn't true. This guy was a guy from Texas who was a U.S. troop. Can't be much more American than that. But it doesn't matter. All you need to do is just sort of say the shibboleths and score your points with your people, and people are gonna, those people are gonna essentially, just go hell yeah, retweet, whatever.
Absolutely. And they're the one to talk a little bit about the commonality between the reaction to this attack and the reaction to the wildfires in LA. They're like extremely valid criticisms you can make about the mayor of Los Angeles and the government of Los Angeles, as well as our mayor and our governance, as we've been doing.
You have to make those
just
critiques.
aren't.
You need to make those critiques. And what these people are doing, and they're doing it on purpose. I'm sorry to interrupt you. What they're doing on purpose is they're pointing at something else, and that actually takes it takes attention away from the legitimate critiques that you can and should be making.
Absolutely, and that's part of their intention. They want to distract from addressing the root causes in favor of advancing their own objectives, which is being done on both among the Elon Musk weirdo conservatives who have DEI as their hobby horse, and among more cynical mainstream liberals who want to use this to justify their support of the massive security state that we have in this country. We are more surveilled than we've ever been in history. We're not the most surveilled people in the world, no doubt. That would be Palestinians living in Gaza in all likelihood. But we're more surveilled than we ever have been, and it has not made us more safe. It has not made us more safe at all. It's made us, I would argue, less safe. We've become less safe as the security state has expanded. And in LA, you see the other LA, I'll say, you see like really in a really horrible way, where they take money from the fire department to give to the police, who are now talking about the threat of looters in areas affected by fire. And
the real
that
problem.
reminds me exactly. And we were talking about this a bit before the show, but it reminds me like 1-to-1 of what people were saying about looters in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. It's a bit different because a lot of people had to look for food and stuff in New Orleans during Katrina, but this fixation on looters as the problem instead of looking at the actual issues is I'm having flashbacks. We haven't learned anything.
It's the classic sleight of hand. I mean, Hurricane Katrina, we had that exact same thing. Now, why are people smashing the store windows and taking the televisions? It's like, who cares? Who cares? Right. Look at what's around you. The entire house is on fire. Why do you care if somebody's smashing a window and taking a television?
Well, I should say, first of all, there doesn't actually seem to be any evidence of looting in LA.
Sure.
I'm just not saying, that it matters. Not that it matters.
Even if that is happening, who cares? Right. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. And you see it in the way LAPD talks about. They're like, if anyone tries to loot, we'll get them. Like it's almost like they want to have an excuse to bust people up, to use all the fun tools that they have.
They're chomping at the bit. They're ready to inflict some justice. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Which that's the relationship of I shouldn't say almost every, because it is every police department to the communities that they police, they surveil, that they in many cases terrorize. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we said this a bit before the show, but sort of everywhere is becoming New Orleans now. We were just unlucky and had it happen to us first, but you're seeing climate crisis in LA looking a lot like Hurricane Katrina did. You in Richmond, you've got your pumps failing, which it's always crazy when I hear about pumps failing anywhere else.
Yeah. This gives you flashbacks. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's not wherever. Maybe it's me.
Yeah, maybe. It's very much true that if you're from New Orleans or lived there for any significant amount of time, wherever you go, you bring a little bit of it with you, and usually that's a good thing. But maybe in this case,
I brought the water outages and the boil orders and all the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I do cook gumbo for my friends, so that's a good thing. I will share it. I will do that. So there you go.
We will insist on our friends abroad eating seasoned food and whatnot.
Oh yeah, make sure. Yeah, hey, you ever try food that tastes good? Try this. You know what's the problem? Yeah. Just to kind of get off for a second. One of the things I've noticed about living in Richmond for a while, they put way too much sugar in everything. You go to an Italian restaurant, you get some tomato sauce or whatever, it's way too sweet. Oh man, it drives me crazy.
Oh yeah, my grandmother tells me about my grandfather's parents, who were from Louisiana but were from North Louisiana, and said that the only seasonings they knew about were sugar and salt. And that's unfortunately still true of even in the South, where we have the reputation for good food. A lot of people do really just season with sugar and salt, and that's a shame. That's a real shame. At least get yourself some Tonys,
Yeah, the salt's a good start. Lay off the sugar. I mean, you need it for some stuff, but not for everything. Come on.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Sort of as we bring it back. I mean, again, when you look at what's happening there, you mentioned the failures of infrastructure in New Orleans. You look at the failures of infrastructure that are happening in Richmond, and you have to see, it's a little bit different from the side of I guess, I don't know what infrastructural solutions other than active prevention, clearing brush or whatever could happen in the West Coast, but you do sort of see just a lot of the fraying of the sort of neoliberal state and all of these things kicking up all at once. I don't know. Have you really thought about this? I mean, there has been so many crises over the past probably 10, 15 years. Starting from, when I started paying attention to it, I guess was when the levees started failing and after Hurricane Katrina. But then you see, huge things like the Flint water crisis. And you also see these other catastrophes that pop up. I mean, we are seeing you know, the sort of back end of neoliberalism, and that it, you know, coming in the form of the infrastructure that we've refused to invest in for generations, finally falling to bits.
Yeah, the neoliberal project finished its job of hollowing out the state just in time for the climate crisis, when the only thing that can meaningfully address the climate crisis is a state with a substantial infrastructure and apparatus to handle these massive problems.
Yeah, and I hate to be this guy, and I'm just sort of like, maybe this is just the stars aligning, but like, we're recording on Thursday. Today was the funeral of President Jimmy Carter and the sort of initiation of that neoliberal process, you know, the defunding of the public state and deregulating of deregulating of a lot of the you know, public services and infrastructure that we have began under him. I mean, people have said that, I mean, you know, as terrible as Nixon was, he was like the last New Deal president. And, you know, we talked about a little bit this last week on the show, when there was this pivot away from, and I'm not even talking about like, you know, Carter the man or his post presidency or anything about that. You know, I'm talking about the pivot from the greater good to essentially individualism, when he's wearing the sweater in the White House saying turn the heat down because you need to do your part. It became less of the sort of like, we can do more together, and more of your responsibility for your part in this austerity that we're doing.
Exactly. Jimmy Carter, and I should say, there are parts of Jimmy Carter's presidency, and like you said, certainly his post presidency, that I have respect for. Like, he was definitely sounding the alarm on environmental issues way earlier than anyone else in American federal politics. And had we maintained some of those programs through the Reagan years, we'd be much better off in dealing with climate issues than we are, because Reagan emptied out what meager things he had going on completely. But yeah, he was the first Democratic president to be in that Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football relationship with the Republicans, where he's like, okay, I'll give you these things that you want. Then will you like me? Then will you be nice to me? And no, they pull the football up and he falls flat on his back. He was the first Democratic president to have that dynamic with the Republican Party and with austerity. He represents a huge generational missed opportunity, because that was exactly the moment where there was a massive amount of popular fervor for all kinds of socially progressive policies, all kinds of that was the height of Americans' disdain for imperialism. You know, abolishing the CIA was not an uncommon position among Democrats in Congress when Jimmy Carter was president. And there were, even guys like Ted Kennedy were hanging out with Michael Harrington sometimes. All like, and I like asterisk on both of those individuals.
Yeah, we're not Harringtonites.
Right. But all that said, there was opportunity there. There was potential there that was totally wasted by Jimmy Carter's kind of inability to really stand up to the opposition. And yeah, after his presidency, I do admire a lot of the work he did, but if you blow it that bad, there's a big asterisk on your whole career.
I mentioned this to Robert last week. You go from, again, the other asterisk by, Johnson, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Like, his politics were definitely not mine, but he was definitely the person that sort of implemented the Great Society, signed the voter right bills of 1964, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, like, he had to be pushed into those positions. But I would take the swagger and the sort of like, punch him in the mouthness of somebody like him over a sort of like, made of blancmange, Jimmy Carter any day, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was
the Democrats, had up until that point, and they just completely became a house of cards when they had to pivot to Carter. I don't know. That's
absolutely.
Sort of like old
LBJ was
like we ain't as tough as we used to be, like an old guy thing to say, perhaps, but
exactly. No, it is true that just as Jimmy Carter was the first kind of pushover Democratic president, LBJ was the last one who was willing to spend political capital in a significant way. Like, he was personally calling people to get the Voting Rights Act passed.
Mm-hmm.
He was personally leveraging like his party relationships, his power as president to affect change. And unfortunately, he went just as hard for the Great Society as he did for Vietnam, and that's what ultimately undermined the Great Society. So like all
Yeah.
his mistakes were his own, but that was like, like a guy like Barack Obama had a similar opportunity to a guy like LBJ. Having popularity for a period of time, having a good majority in Congress for a period of time, and
Every president since him has had that
mhm,
opportunity. But like, yeah,
yeah,
Obama definitely had it with the sort of like public, like popular mandate.
right, and yeah, I mean, the fact that we look back wistfully on people like LBJ and even to an extent Jimmy Carter is really just a condemnation of how the Democratic Party has evolved post Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And again, like you mentioned that they are, it's only for like specific things, like
hmm
for Clinton, I guess. The one thing that he was like ready to spend political capital on was like welfare reform. When it came to
right,
Obama, at least it was actually like, no, he caved on Obamacare. It was nothing. He didn't have nothing. He gave it all
right,
to the
yeah,
banks. Yeah, he caved on the public option of
there,
Obamacare, which
yeah,
would have been better than what, it's not as good as like, outlawing private insurance, but it's
right. It
definitely
took
better than what we got now.
One Democratic senator in Joe Lieberman opposing the public option
Yeah.
for him to drop it, which LBJ would not have allowed something like that,
Yeah.
frankly.
And then Biden, I guess, had that sort of like mindset, but it was only for war. It's only
Yeah,
for bombing
yeah,
Palestinians and like arming Israel, and that's sort of like what his single-minded, like, I am going to leverage every possible relationship to make sure that continues. Everything else, I mean, American Rescue Plan, and he gave up on Build Back Better. His entire
yeah,
campaign was, we were building back better, Jack, and it was just cave because Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema were just like, no, we're not voting for that.
yep,
I mean, there was a
yeah, and
report
what
that
it
just came out. Well, I guess it was and he's not somebody that I necessarily like agree with very often. He's probably one of the more progressive people in Congress. Ro Khanna, he said there was a
mhm,
incident that came out that happened when they were trying to
mhm,
implement a final Biden pick for the National Labor Relations Board, and it was a deadlock, and Joe Manchin was out of town. They couldn't get Kamala Harris to come in and break the tie.
mhm.
So it's just this idea that like Democrats don't prioritize or aren't willing to fight for like even very basic things. Because what
Yeah,
ended up happening, the results of this was the Democrats essentially are not going to even go into the Trump presidency with a temporary majority on the National Labor Relations Board, which is critical for the state of labor in
mhm,
this country. It's gonna be way worse. Unions gonna suffer just
yeah,
because of that, because of one vote.
yeah. The NLRB would have been more or less safe, or
For
as
a
safe as
time,
it
at least. For
really,
a time.
right, for 2 years, which would have
Yeah.
brought us to the midterms. Which,
Mhm.
a lot can change in two
Yes,
years around the midterms.
absolutely.
And it should also be stated that, like, for ages, like, the one thing you could say that Joe Biden was all right on, the one thing you could say that he left some kind of positive legacy on,
Mhm.
was a robust NLRB.
Yep.
Um, and Lena Khan, I guess
Mhm.
I should shout out. But um, he,
Consumer
you
Financial
know,
Protection. No, I'm sorry. It was Secretary of Commerce.
not Secretary of Commerce.
No,
Yeah,
and
she
all
was the head of the.
CFPB,
Yes, she was head of
Consumer
consumer.
Financial Protection Board.
Yes, exactly. And his administration, I should say, because I think I think we know that he's not really tending to the day to day stuff.
As close to a vegetative
Just let
state
it
as you
die.
can be in while also able to like walk around.
Yeah, I mean, he's been spending these last weeks of his presidency just doubling down on this narcissistic impulse, this that I think is like fundamentally who he is. Like when he is yelling at reporters, nobody's met as many world leaders as me. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, half the people you're talking to are like half your age, and you've been in government since the Vietnam War. Of course you've met more world leaders. Like, that's not the flex you think it is. The way that, and you brought up Build Back Better, and I want to say this, Build Back Better was what Joe Biden wanted to be his biggest lasting legacy. He wanted that to be his biggest project, and no one stuck by him on that more. No one fought for that alongside him harder than the, minuscule further left part of Congress, the squad and so on. And what do they get for that? What do they get for their trouble? They get blamed for for Kamala Harris's loss. They get blamed for the Democratic Party cratering, and they turn away from it completely. Again, that's kind of, for some of those members of Congress, that's kind of their Lucy and the football moment in some ways. But it was the right thing to do to support Build Back Better, specifically the way some squad members supported Biden, even when he should have been replaced, like right before he was replaced, I should say. Was a misstep, but supporting Build Back Better was the right thing to do. That was the right thing to spend political capital on, and members of Congress did, and they got nothing for it whatsoever but contempt. It's ridiculous. The most narcissistic president of all time.
Yeah, and well, that's a pretty high bar. I think Obama.
Did I say all time? I meant our time. Our time, maybe. I mean, yeah, like he's settling petty grievance. Yeah, Obama is too, but just the way that Joe Biden's defined his presidency as like, oh, Barack couldn't get that done. I'd like to see Barack try this. Like, just so pathetic, frankly. Anyway, I mean, the one small silver lining of the way the presidential election turned out, if you ask me, is that Joe Biden has been denied a legacy he never, ever deserved. If Kamala Harris won, he probably would have gotten that legacy he really, really wanted and never deserved. He will not have that legacy anymore. He will not be remembered by history well. He ran on that whole saving the soul of the nation thing, and here we are 4 years later, and we're right back where we started. And it's probably going to be a bit worse.
A worse situation, almost unquestionably, yeah. And that the sort of like, when you sort of look at the sort of situation that we're in now, and you see that even after and this is something that we talked about a little bit earlier about, the Democrats would rather reign in heaven than reign in hell than go to heaven. When you see somebody like AOC, who is a genuinely popular, and there's critiques, not necessarily nearly as many as the ones that there are the other people that we put asterisks on, but when you see somebody like that, they're going for a committee position, and the Democrats will still fight tooth and nail and rip out hair for that to deny her that position when she has a popular mandate, when she has a popular positions, and she has the ability, I think, maybe other people don't feel this way, but she has the ability to be a significant leader in a popular political movement, and they decide to push her aside, to deny her even a committee position in Congress for somebody who has just always been a loyal soldier to the never-ending long-term apparatus that got us in the situation that we're currently in. How can you look at that and not think that these people are the enemy? Now, I mean, we live in America. The political scope is very narrow for what is actually possible in terms of at least the official channels. But how are you supposed to relate to, a party that is essentially in its very bones counter any kind of working class progress, any kind of anything that is not business as usual? You know what I mean? How do you relate to that when you're trying to actually build social movements to make change?
Yeah, the party, such as it is literally, not figuratively, dying. All of its top figures and all the people it's investing with, whatever shreds of power the party has going into the next 4 years,
Dude, Joe Biden is what, 80 something years old? Jimmy Carter died at 100. We talk about how old Jimmy Carter was. Joe Biden's like less than 20 years younger than him. He was president before I was born, and I'm old.
Yeah, Bill Clinton is younger than both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's crazy. That's crazy. And he already looks like a ghost. Like, he looks like a skeleton. Yeah, it's
not enough.
It's the contempt. It's the contempt. Like, this party is running on contempt for its younger figures like AOC, who I have criticisms of. I think she made a lot of concessions to try to get that committee seat. And I think at the expense of her popularity, at her credibility as an outsider, at her credibility as, like, someone independent of that generation.
She took major risks.
She did. And she didn't get anything for it. And I wish she had. She would have been better than the guy they put in charge of it. But it just goes to show that
Virginia guy, by the way.
A Virginia guy? Oh man, yeah. And doesn't he already have throat cancer?
Yeah, he has esophageal cancer.
Like, it's just like, I'm sorry, like these like you can't, like, this is a very important 4 years. If you're a serious party, you have to have your strongest soldiers, literally, like, physically and mentally and politically leading the charge. And AOC, like I said, for warts and all, does have a lot of popular appeal among the mainstream liberal Democratic base, even. Like, like the mythologized resistance wine mom loves AOC now.
She also has an ability to communicate like few in Congress do.
Absolutely.
She's willingness to put herself out there to do it.
Like, she is an extremely gifted
Instagram lives, and just, like, even if she's wrong, she'll at least be engaging with people, and you can see that. And the problem, one of the ways that, I'm sorry, I'm like jumping in and I'm getting very fired up about this, but like, you can see that, like, the way that like it's actually come out in, like, it's a little bit of the shoo that happens behind the scenes, but there's this sort of like idea, and it tells you how Democrats think. It's like that there's this idea that doing Instagram lives and talking directly to constituents is like gauche in Democrat circles. Like, you're like, oh, you're talking with a hoi polloi, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Proximity to voters, to the people you represent, is like, they think it's these mainstream Democrats, the Pelosi types, think that it'll give them cooties. Like, they are fundamentally resentful and disdainful of
the
average
great
people.
Unwalked passes.
Yeah, and like, we saw it in this presidential election. We see it over and over and over again. They would much rather lose by doing things exactly the way they want to than win and by, like, making concessions to their own base. Yeah, they'll make concessions to the other side
all day.
Absolutely, all they want. Like, Kamala Harris will put a Republican in the cabinet, which would put her administration quantifiably to the right of Biden.
She won't. Oh no, she won't.
Yeah, she won't now. I mean, she'll definitely there'll definitely be a Republican on the cabinet, but more than one. It's baffling. It's baffling. And you actually see it. You see this kind of gloating in who's getting invitations and photo ops at the White House in these last weeks, who gets the Congressional Medals of Honor. They, like, fundamentally are losers and love to lose. And like, I am, me, like, I'm a dyed in the wool socialist, but I'm willing to work with liberals, and I've been able to do so effectively without compromising what I believe in. But it's just, you can't.
They don't make it easy, do they?
No, they don't make it easy. They really don't. But they fundamentally do not want to work with us, not at that level. Like, they're when I talk about the base, when I talk about typical liberal voters, there's gains to be made, there's movement to be had. But among the elites, those that are in the halls of power, they do not want us. They would, like you said, much rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. And it's it's just baffling. It's just baffling, and they're leading us right off the cliff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so again, you mentioned, the there's only one game in town when it comes to actually making a change through the official channels. You listen to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade, Jeff and Jack Reno Sweeney. There's only one game in town and through the official channels, and that's sort of a structural problem, but there are ways to build capacity to start to move things in the right direction. One of the things DSA New Orleans has coming up is an organizing fair. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and some of the sort of like thoughts behind it? Because when I see something like that, and I know that like chapters of DSA are doing that sort of across the country, what the intention of that seems to be is to bring organizations together and to build that not necessarily. I don't want to like be delusional about this. Like, there's a lot of leftists that are like, we need to build a socialist party now. And I don't even necessarily technically agree with that, but in terms when it comes to capacity, there's a lot of steps that need to be done before you can get there. And what this seems to, the idea of what this organizing fair seems to do, at least when I see it, is find organizations, find groups, find people, individuals that are interested in an alternative to the politics of neoliberalism, the politics of losing, and just sort of like people who are discontented with the direction that things are going right now, and actually bringing them together, putting them in place and say, hey, what are we going to do about this?
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. And I should first of all give big credit to my co-chair Wash, who took the lead on putting together the organizing fair, because I was first distracted by the election season, and then we had the Entergy gas sale, which we can get into if you want, but that's a whole can of worms. And then of course the holidays. So Wash has done a phenomenal job and a lot of work to pull that together, and I'm really excited about it. But yeah, on the one hand, it is an effort to help cohere like-minded organizations that have similar goals as we enter, not just the Trump administration, but as we prepare for our municipal elections here in New Orleans, which are in October 2025. And then secondly,
it's already in Jeff Landry hell, so we got to do something about that too.
Exactly. Exactly. And secondly, we have a lot of people out there who want to start to organize for the first time in their lives. And it's a bit different than in 2016, 2017, where you had kind of like this mad dash, you had the Women's March, you had these massive demonstrations. We're not really seeing it play out that way this time, where it's just kind of everybody and it's kind of a mess of but we're seeing people.
The Democrats have bent the knee, like all that sort of contingent, not necessarily like there's a lot of PO'd wine moms out there, just like there were in 2016. There's no question about that, but like the political leadership just isn't there.
Right. And fewer people are willing to do things like turn out in the streets like they were in 2016 and 2017, which has major cons associated with it. But that said, the people who are turning out and are trying to organize now are people who have either been thinking about it for a long time and have finally gotten the kick in the pants to do it. People who might have dropped out over the last 8 years and are getting back in. So the people who are looking to get organized right now, it's a more predictable group of people than the people who turned out in 2016, 2017. Yeah.
And we have more experience onboarding people like that as well. We have more experience.
Exactly.
Things like that.
And so that's the second part of this org fair is to have a one-stop shop for these folks that want to get organized, to find the organizations they'd like to be in, and to see that we all get along, that it's not, an exclusive thing, which, I'll say this, in 2016, 2017, that wasn't so much the case. Like, there was a lot of kind of turf wars, more or less, over, or legitimacy wars, like which is the best org, which is the most representative org, so on and so forth. What we've learned, one of the good lessons I think we've properly assimilated in the last 8 years, even though we find ourselves in much the same place in a lot of ways, and like we said, somewhat worse, is a lot of that petty stuff is kind of out of the way. Like we know what the assignment is, and we're all putting our nose to the grindstone to do it. And I'm not seeing as much of the just kind of chaotic sniping at each other that we got in 2016, 2017.
Thank God for that. I mean, geez.
Yeah.
You ever see that?
I mean,
movie?
I should knock on wood, but
let's not get our put the cart before the horse or any count our chickens or any of the other cliches. But
exactly.
You ever see that movie, The Warriors? Classic movie from the 1970s.
Yeah, the musical.
No,
it's been many
it's not
years.
Musical. Not a musical.
It's not a musical.
No,
but it's about two gangs. Right?
That's
West Side Story. Yeah. Sorry, I haven't seen The Warriors.
The Warriors is a movie. It's the idea of it, and it all goes to hell, of course. But like the idea, at least at the beginning, is that like all the gangs in the city are gonna come and meet at this one big thing, and like talk about like, hey, there's only 10,000 cops in New York City. With us, we're 50,000 strong, and there's this like charismatic leader, and like essentially the idea of it was to bring it all together. Like to be very corny about it, I feel like this is a little bit similar. Hopefully it doesn't end up the same way because I don't want to spoil it for you, but it didn't go so good in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, that does give a good opportunity to say that you do have to be clear-headed. Like you can't paper over differences.
No.
You can't pretend. You can't like kind of make that sort of accelerationist argument and pretend that the fact that things are going to be really bad for a bit is going to be good for us. Because like there's going to be some attrition through these 4 years of Trump. Like there are going to be people that are either forced out of the movement or drop out. Like it will happen. That said, I do feel better about our skills as organizers to, one, be able to cope with that kind of problem a bit more effectively, and two, to be able to counteract it with effective organizing. I'll say I know our chapter of DSA has gotten a good uptick in membership. Some people completely new, some people who have been out for a while, some people who we've worked with through other organizations, seeing us as like a good hub for certain kinds of work. And we've been able to maintain a lot of interorganizational relationships that started for namely things like Palestine solidarity in the last year and change. And I see that building. It's frustrating because in spite of the fact that we in terms like us as socialists, we have more people than ever with us right now. If you look at some specific like Palestine solidarity, you have more people in this country caring about that issue than ever before. But there's like a contradiction in that, like in spite of those things, we have not changed policy in a major, meaningful way yet. Like I said, we're 4 years after Trump, we're back where we started, more or less. So that's a tough contradiction to deal with. Because that means we have to get more innovative. That means we have to get more creative. That means we have to try new things that haven't really been done before, because what we've done before has worked in some ways, but has not worked in terms of moving the needle on things we care about. So what do we have to do to move the needle more? We have to try new things. We have to learn from our mistakes, learn from past movements to a certain extent, without sort of fetishizing the past and repeating the past mistakes. But like the socialist movement in this country is bigger than it was in 2016. It's bigger than it was in 2008 for sure. If you like, a lot of people draw the line at where the new American socialist movement started at like 2016 with the Bernie Sanders campaign. I kind of go a bit further back to Occupy Wall Street. That was like the first kind of inkling of popular anti-capitalist sentiment in this country in a long time. And if you compare where we're at to Occupy Wall Street, like we've moved so far. Like we're
past the up twinkles.
Yeah. 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 No, I remember watching the live streams of Occupy Wall Street and the mic check and the People's
I
Assembly
like the
where
mic check. I didn't like the uptwinkles.
yeah, my mic check has utility for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that like anyway. Um, so all it is to say, we are moving in a positive direction in terms of building, as you alluded to, a kind of mass movement that is capable to be the base for a new party. Like, can we like declare the American Socialist Party tomorrow? I don't think so. Are we on the way to have our all our things in place to be able to do something like that within my lifetime? Maybe, probably. Will that party like win something in my lifetime? That's another question. But I think, by the time I'm an old man, we'll have advanced beyond where we are now in terms of how we are organized as socialists.
Yeah. And we can't be like doctrinaire. You mentioned the Democratic Party is like dying, like literally and figuratively.
Mm-hmm.
And like if like how this thing sort of forms, I guess. And this is my opinion, maybe you'll disagree, but like if this new thing that we're building is just called the Democratic Party, but it is everything different than, than the crap show that we currently have, I would be happy with that. I don't care. I think that there is a sort of like, we need to have a socialist party that calls itself the socialist. We would need a structural reform to make that take place. We would need to have a complete and utter structural, like electoral reform for that to happen. But if it did, and if it overtook the Democratic Party and Democratic Party just dies, that'd be fine too by me. But I kind of don't care. Like assume the form of the the dead thing, or create a whole new thing. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean the way it will look, I think, is it's dependent on a million and one factors. But if you look at previous evolutions in the party system in this country under this constitution, it usually happens when one party starts to die and like a good chunk of it gets absorbed by something new, and other like small bits and bobs that have existed in the periphery adhere. I mean, that's how the Republican Party formed in the like just before the Civil War.
R.I.P. to the Whigs.
Right, by the dissipation of the Whigs, because the Whigs were not able to withstand the internal contradictions that party had over the issue of slavery. The Democratic Party might not be able to withstand this contradiction between needing to rely on a working class base, but increasingly over time abandoning that working class base in favor of being the party of
Mark Cuban
employees and Mark Cuban. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I can't say I know what form that will take. That it'll take. And as you know, I am a elected member of an elected member of leadership of the Democratic Party here in New Orleans. So and there are good people who do that work, and who are in the right place. That said, there's a massive amount of not just inertia, but like, undermining by the party apparatus. Like we saw, like we don't have to get all the way into it, but we saw what happened, with the Nevada Dems and the way
the DNC came in and essentially moved money from the local party to the from the state party to the local party, Clark County Democrats, because the state party the state party had been taken over by essentially a DSA majority, right?
Exactly. And there's similar cases to that that have happened throughout history. But like I'm sympathetic to the argument that every time they do that, their capacity to do that weakens, and
they got to show their hand. Yeah.
Right. And in other ways, the Democratic Party has weakened further. I think it's lost. I think in this election, it lost a lot of legitimacy with people who had never previously questioned its legitimacy.
Yeah.
So
even party apparatus, like parts of the party apparatus are doing that.
Oh yeah, like Jen Psaki, the former former press secretary on her MSNBC show, was specifically talking about what we were talking about earlier, where she thought the Democrats should have let AOC have that committee seat to signal that that they're willing to pass
At
the
least
torch.
throw a bone, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And as the Democratic Party, the further it gets into committing to not throwing people a bone, the sooner people will start to question its priors, right? So again, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know
What the
how
form
this
it's going to take or whatever. That's not important.
exactly.
To some
But I
people, that
think
is important. It is not important to me.
right, right. I think we're doing what we need to do to answer that question when it becomes answerable.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we're doing what we can to agitate for the conditions we need to do what we want. I don't know if that sounds really vague or not, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, we need it. We can't even talk about what form it's going to take if we don't have the ability to influence which form, like a change at all. You can't build a fire without having tinder and sticks and some kind of way to ignite it. You need to have there's a certain number of steps that need to take place. This is not going to happen like a lot of the sort of like romantic folks will think about it. It's just like, oh, the conditions will get horrible, and then the working class will simply rise up and destroy and overthrow the capitalist overlords. Like, sorry, there's going to be a lot more working parts to it than that.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sympathetic to that almost accelerationist argument because I know from experience that it'll just immiserate the people we need to organize.
It creates chaos. It creates chaos. It creates a power vacuum, and whatever fills that power vacuum is going to be something that has power. And right now, if the lid comes off and we do have a power vacuum, the thing that is, well, we're building capacity, like you mentioned. There's a stronger socialist movement now than there's been in several generations. I would still think that if the Democratic Party died, it would be, at least at this point, completely filled by essentially right wingers. It would be
if it happened tomorrow, we would be more likely to see a party system dominated by the Republicans and like the libertarians.
The worst like maniacs on earth.
Right. And I should say the guy that ended up being the libertarian nominee for president, he was a woke libertarian,
a woke DEI libertarian.
He was a DEI libertarian. He was good on trans issues and things like that. But whatever. I don't put faith in the Libertarian Party. That's just kind of talking about it like sports, I guess.
Yeah.
Always interesting to see what those guys are up to. They do have a Libertarian Socialist Caucus in the Libertarian Party. Isn't that crazy?
Oh yeah. I didn't know that, but that's cool. I mean, like, hey, they probably don't have that much influence because they're
no. If any members of the Libertarian Socialist Caucus of the Libertarian Party are listening, join DSA.
Yeah, do that.
You don't have to quit the Libertarian Party to do so, but I encourage you to. And you know what? Check out our Libertarian Socialist Caucus. Maybe you'll like them. Yeah. I'm not a member of any caucus, I should say, but yeah.
I'm not either anymore, and I'm probably never going to ever be again. But the super last thing, you mentioned the sort of like generational change, and you mentioned Occupy Wall Street, and I can sort of like wrap that part up in a bow, and then we can sort of sign off. But one of my buddies, who's actually the co-chair of the Labor Caucus, a Labor Committee rather, of the Richmond chapter, along with me, I'm the other co-chair of it. But I was talking to him. He's a younger guy. And I was talking about, I made the same joke about the uptwinkles to him that I made to you. And he's like, what are you talking about? I don't know what's going on. I was like, Occupy Wall Street. He's like, yeah, I remember Occupy Wall Street. I was like 10. I'm like, oh no. So we're getting to that point, like sooner than we want to. You're younger than me, but we're getting to that sort of like, if you want to see the world in a better place, by the time you're an old man, which I'm not an old man, I'm 40, but like, by the time that you're, older, we got to start doing that stuff now. Like, cause that time flies really quick.
Yeah. I for my part, I started off in the chapter as like the chapter's baby. Like I was the youngest active member of the chapter for a period of time. And now I'm not.
We had to babysit you. We had you were literally in childcare.
And now I'm not. Now I'm not one of the older members because we still have a lot of the same people around. But I'll say that it's good when you are in an organization where there is another member that comes in and is active and makes you feel old. That means your organization is alive and thriving and growing.
It's not going to die with you. It's not going to end
exactly
when you put it down. That's actually a very liberating feeling too,
because
it means that when you get to your end of the part of the marathon, you can pass that baton and somebody else can run.
Exactly. No, I'm always so grateful when I find out that something important got done in the chapter that I had next to nothing to do with. Like the statement that we were talking about on the attack got written without me having to, micromanage or I had to edit, which
on
is
somebody.
fine.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Didn't have to, call people up and everything, which I feel really good about that. And it's something I was worried about. And as you know, that you were worried about, like after COVID, the substantial capacity reduction and the problems we had getting back on our feet. I'm feeling that we've eliminated most of that hangover.
Mm-hmm.
So
it was
so
rough.
I am.
That was a rough period.
It was.
It was because we just needed somebody to keep the lights on.
Yep. And now it's not every conversation is how do we keep the lights on. Now it's like how do we grow. So so if we're closing out, how do we grow? Go to this organizing fair if you're in New Orleans. It's on the 25th, Saturday the 25th, starting at noon at the Andre Caillou Center on Bayou Road. Come see us and come see a bunch of other orgs. We have orgs representing all kinds of different things there. We are supposed to have unions present. We're going to have queer liberation groups present. We're going to have energy justice groups present, environmental justice groups present, so on and so forth. It'll be really great. All of the best orgs in town in one place. You won't want to miss it.
Can you dig it? Jack, where can people find you? And if you want to say before we get out.
So you can find me, if you're in New Orleans, you can find me at a DSA meeting. So definitely join DSA at dsausa.org/join. And you'll be put on our list and we'll contact you. Our next general meeting is on the 18th. So definitely come out to that. If you want to check out what I'm up to online, the best place to do that is you can see my handle on the bottom of the screen. That's on Instagram and Twitter, JRS4LA. You can keep up with me there. And I think that's all of the things I'm up to.
Yeah, just on DSA as well. DSANewOrleans.org is the website,
yes.
And you can see all the calendar events and everything that's coming up, committee meetings, public events, etc. Thank you so much, Jack. Appreciate you coming on the show as always. We have to count to see if you're the leader or Mark Allen is now. He wants to come on and talk about some stuff too. So you gotta. It's going to be a real fraud conversation, like a fraud competition for number one all-time guest. So
it's a race now. It's a real race.
Yeah, it's on. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening. You can listen to Good Morning Comrade every Saturday at 10 a.m. on WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3, WHIVLP New Orleans. I'm sorry, WHIVFM.org/listen to listen online. Find me on Twitter at Eminent Prof. And I'm on Instagram and I'm on Bluesky, but Bluesky kind of sucks. I'm not gonna. Is that? Am I getting in trouble for that? It kind of sucks. I mean,
maybe it'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll see. Anyway, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. And yeah, we love you. Bye bye. All right, man.